Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you for coming along to today's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. We'll jump straight onto the agenda. And item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We've got nothing planned for practicing to leave the building today, so if the alarms go off, we'll treat it for real. And if we can leave the building through the doors either side of the chamber, down the stairs, out the front door, meet across the road by the Yorkshire Bank. If anybody needs any assistance in that, give us a shout and we'll make sure that's provided. It's also a good time to remind people to... Well, I haven't got mine, I left it at home. Best plan is to turn your phones off or put them onto silent, please. And just to remind people as well, as is the practice of this authority, the majority of our meetings are filmed and recorded and put out on YouTube, hopefully in the next couple of days. Item number 2 is to receive apologies for absence.
We have apologies, Chair, from Councillor Longdon and also from Councillor Wilson with substitute Councillor Evans.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of September. Are you happy that I sign those? Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Item number 4, to receive any declarations of disclosable and pecuniary or other interests in accordance with the Code of Conduct. None? Thank you. Item number 5 are declarations of contact. I think most members have received a letter about Watling Street. Yeah? Okay. Are there any others? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to items 1 and 2, I've been contacted by members of the public. I've given no indication.
Okay. Thank you.
By Councillor Tromans in relation to the Meadowcraft farm application. I haven't given any indication as to how I would vote or my opinion on the application.
Okay, thank you. Which then takes us on to those applications where members of the public have indicated a wish to speak. If I just run through that procedure, is it when it comes to that item, and actually it's the first 4 items in that order, the officer will present the report. Following on from that, I'll take the speakers as listed, and just for members' information, on item number 1 there's an extra speaker, Mr. Colin Kinder, who's an objector. The Constitution allows the speakers to speak for 3 minutes. Once the egg timer goes off, I'll stop you from speaking. That's just so that I'm fair to everybody, that they get the same amount of time. However, at the end of that, members could ask you to clarify something. It can only be something from what you've said in that 3 minutes. And then the officer may want to add any views. And then once something's been moved and seconded, we'll debate the matter as a committee and hopefully reach a decision. In the majority of applications, we do make the decision on the day. Some are deferred for site visits, as our first one was last time, or maybe other information, but normally we make the decision on the day. I think that covers that. Okay then, so if we go on to item number 1, which was our site visit today, which was James Street. Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. A site visit was carried out this afternoon on this application at the request of members to assess the intensity of the use of the site, the design and impact on character of the area, the impact on car parking and highway safety. The application is for the partial demolition of the existing commercial buildings on the site and erection of one block of 6 apartments. James Street is within Abbey Green, and there is a footpath from the end of James Street to Midland Road, close to the amenities of the district centre of Abbey Green and relatively close to Nuneaton town centre. I pointed that out this afternoon when we were on the site visit. The property is almost at the end of the road and is immediately adjacent to the residential property of 14 James Street, which is the end of a group of Victorian terrace properties. There were 10 objections from 10 addresses for the original layout, which was for 9 apartments, and 1 subsequent objection to the amended layout, reducing the site to 6 apartments. A petition of 22 signatories was also received objecting to the application, as well as a letter from Councillor Phillips. Please see pages 19 and 20 of your agenda for details of the objections. The key issues to assess in the determination of this application are shown in front of you. Sorry, there's only this screen working. In relation to the principle of development, the site is in close proximity, as I say, to Abbey Green District Centre and relatively close to the Nuneaton Town Centre, so it is considered to be a sustainable location. Whilst this is not an allocated housing site in the Borough plan, it would account towards the Council's contributions for dwellings on windfall sites. Whilst the site is currently vacant, there is lawful commercial use on the application site, so a commercial use could operate again, which could have potential negative impacts on the surrounding area. The site is brownfield and therefore complies with national and local policy as sequentially preferable for development. The site is surrounded by a variety of other residential uses, along with the occasional commercial use, such as that on the small area to the north of the site, which is a repair garage. That's what was pointed out today. There's also some other commercial buildings behind that. In regard to it is therefore considered that in principle the use of the site for residential is acceptable. In regard to the impact on visual amenity, the proposal has been designed as a 2-storey unit with a front-facing gable feature with proportions broadly similar to the houses next to it. The on screen shows the front elevation of the proposal against the backdrop of the adjacent terrace properties. So obviously the proposal, and these are the adjacent properties. That's number 14 James Street. In relation to the design, this has been amended over time, and you will note the ridge and eaves height match up with the adjacent properties, and the windows have similar lintel and stone headers. Also on the front elevation would be 2 ground floor bay windows and a small gablet feature, breaking up the long eaves line. There are some bay windows in the street. The walls are proposed to be brickwork, similarly to the surrounding residential area, and it is considered that if approved, a condition is appropriate to submit bricks and roof samples to be approved by the Council. In conclusion, it's considered the proposal is largely in keeping with the street form. The proposed flats are to be sited next to and opposite existing residential properties. In reference to the impact on the adjacent house, number 14 James Street, which as I say is this street, the nearest part of the new building to number 14 projects only 1.2 metres beyond the 2-storey part of this house. The projection I'm referring to is that part there. The residential design guide would allow a projection of up to 3 metres as being acceptable from the back of the house. Notwithstanding this, behind this house there is a further single-storey brick-built area which seems to be old storage, possibly a coal house, and then beyond that there is a sitting out area with a timber corrugated roof. No windows to this neighbouring property are affected. This neighbouring property has one of the adjacent buildings of the site to be demolished at its boundary wall, and which runs along the side garden for more than half the length of the garden. For the rest of the site boundary, there is a brick wall which is to be reduced in height to make safe but to retain privacy. Again, this is to be conditioned if approved. One feature of the new building that will impact the adjacent property is a 2.5-storey wing that projects beyond the main building by 10 metres. That's this part here. This will have ground and first floor side windows as well as roof lights that will look across to the neighbour's garden. So there will be views from there across into the garden here. However, the distance from these windows to the garden boundary of this neighbour's property is 11 metres, so complies fully with the minimum distance of 7 metres guidance in the residential design guide. The new front windows, the front windows here, are approximately 11 metres across the street to residential properties on the other side of the road. That's numbers 11, 13 and 15 James Street. The distance required from window to window would normally be 20 metres if it was across private space. However, as it's across the road, the residential design guide states that those distances can be reduced somewhat because you've still got the sense of overlooking. You could stand in that road and look potentially in those windows. However, having said that, there's no doubt this will provide views of a new building that were not there previously. But loss of views is not a reason for a refusal. In relation to the neighbours to the rear, 18, 20 and 22 Charles Street, these are those properties here, there is a distance of 38.5 metres from the back of the projection to those rear windows. The residential design guide asks for 30 metres, so again it's well over. In terms of overlooking to these neighbouring properties to gardens, there is also a distance of more than 7 metres. It's 11 metres from the rear windows here to those neighbouring gardens, so again meets with the residential design guide. In relation to the future new occupiers within the site, the proposal largely meets the residential design guide. There's one exception to a lounge kitchen window here, where it's infringed by at 45 degrees, which again is in accordance with our residential design guide, by that wing there. So when you stand in that window, you will see to an extent that wing there. However, it's 23 metres away, so the distance really mitigates the feeling of impact to that window. The main views from that window will be down the garden. It's therefore considered that there's no significant impact on the residential amenity of existing neighbouring properties or future occupiers of the proposed apartments. There's no doubt that street parking in the area is an existing problem, but which cannot be blamed on the proposed development. National policy states that in order to refuse an application on highway impact, the proposed impact must be considered to have a severe highway issue, safety issue. Warwickshire County Council Highways were consulted on the scheme. They weighed up the potential vehicular movements of the existing commercial use against a new residential use and raised no objections subject to conditions. Warwickshire County Council Fire and Safety also had no objections subject to appropriate emergency vehicular access being in place. As this refers to on-street parking, this could never be guaranteed for any development as it's outside of the application site and outside of the applicant's control. There's no form of control in the area, such as residents-only parking or yellow lines. NBC Refuse also have no objection, subject to the bins being taken out to the street for collection. The proposal will provide off-street parking to the rear for 10 cars for the 5 two-bedroom flats and 1 one-bedroom flat, and which is provided in the rear car park via an undercroft. The undercroft is through the building here. This equates to 1 additional space on top of the 1.5 spaces per dwelling maximum stated in the council's parking guidance, which in any case can only be given limited weight now as it's no longer extant. The proposal also provides space for bicycle storage. Residents were concerned about lorries visiting the site during construction and how this would impact on the nearby roads. This would be for a limited period, and Warwickshire County Council have not requested any construction management plan or conditions. All in all, it's considered that without an objection from County Highways, refusal on highway safety grounds would be difficult to defend at appeal. Neighbours raised concerns about dust and asbestos removal during the construction process, but this is dealt with by other legislation and is not a planning matter. The Environmental Health team have requested conditions relating to potential contamination and noise insulation for the new apartments. These conditions will require site investigation and a noise assessment to be carried out so that the appropriate measures to adequately mitigate any potential harm by way of contamination or noise is provided. In conclusion, the proposer would represent a sustainable use of a brownfield site within the existing urban area and in a sustainable location. The recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions as set out on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. I should have said, actually, when people do want to speak, the large button on your console will turn the mics on and off. Councillor Phillips.
Speaking as a final on behalf of the residents, I still believe that if the committee were minded to refuse this application and it went to appeal, then the inspector may also be minded to refuse the appeal. I think there are strong grounds for refusal based on the design and the impact on the character of the area. It is still an over-intensive development, having already been reduced from 9 flats to 6. The design does not sit well with the Victorian terrace properties to this tight, old-fashioned cul-de-sac with no through road. According to Design Guide 3.1, residential development, including small infilling, should be designed to appear as part of the extension to an existing settlement, which in turn respects the form, scale, architecture and materials of the local built environment. These flats do not have anything in common with the rest of the street. An example stated that the windows do not match, although it would seem that since that might have changed, do not match the same height or width for the adjacent properties, with 2 bay windows being proposed for the front of the developments, which again are not a feature on the front elevations of adjacent properties. So I have to ask, why not? In plain words, the design in its scale, architecture and form are not in keeping with the rest of the street. I would also question the size of the flats for the inhabitants. This development will not relate to the character of the area. With reference to highways, I trust the committee were aware of the highway issues around that area, although it could be difficult to refuse as stated on highway grounds alone. The county highways did point out that the amount of parking is considered less than should be provided. Notwithstanding 10 car parking spaces for 6 flats, this infill will, however, impact on an already crowded street and area and still will carry limited weight in a reason for refusal, but it will carry weight. There has been no commercial use there, Mr Chair, for over 17 years, so how the Warwickshire County Council Highways can do a comparison between then and now, I don't think that stacks up. Highway safety will be an issue for the residents. It already is due to the number of cars in the area. Regarding sort of refuge saying it's okay, refuge are now only saying it's okay because we've had to have the police out to enforce the wagons trying to get up the street. Mr Chair, I'm not against infill. I'm not against redevelopment of brownfield sites, but it should be in keeping with the local area's character. I think it is over-intensive, and at the end of this cul-de-sac, it is not in keeping with the houses adjacent to it in its design. I would ask that committee either refuse or defer whilst the developer continues to redesign the development with officers whilst continuing or even talking to the residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any... No? Lee Holt.
Of the committee. We, the residents of James Street, would like to thank you for all coming and visiting the site today. We hope that it's given you an understanding of why we object to this development as it stands. We do appreciate that brownfield should be developed, but we feel it's too large a development in too small a space. The quantity of dwellings shoehorned into this plot creates small, cramped living spaces that cannot be of any benefit to either the people that buy them or ourselves. The residents of our community understand that the parking has been based on the allotted 1.5 per unit, but we've never been given that luxury. We are cramped. Any vehicles trying to turn in and out of that property once it's developed will struggle, because once cars are parked both sides of the street, the turning circle in and out will be very, very limited. Our area is already being cramped with houses of multiple occupation being developed on Stanley Road. We've got 2 that are now 4-bedroomed MHOs and 2 other properties that have been purchased by developers. So we feel that as a community, we should be able to have proper family homes, quality family homes with gardens. Our children have grown up in this area, and we've got younger children now, so it'd be nice to have families in the street, not singular couples coming and going and no interaction whatsoever. I did notice as well that the refuse department has now changed its objection to an agreement, but in the original plans they were in objection because getting in and out of the street during the day is an issue. Residents on Stanley Road don't have enough parking spaces. They park wherever they can, and the refuse trucks don't always get in when they want to. And as Mr. Phillips has already said, it has not been an active business for over 15 years. And then it was just a van coming and going occasionally through the day when there were few residents even owning cars then parked in the street. So there will be an increase in traffic, not just from the properties, but also from visitors, from delivery vehicles as well. And we do feel that it will be just too much. We hope that you could reject this plan as it stands and give us something better for families, please, not just apartments. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. No? Mr. Kinder.
At the last planning council meeting, we put forward several suggestions for ways in which the site could be developed and explained our concerns. We also heard the concerns of residents in a similar case in a nearby street and heard the views of council members. It was stated at the meeting that whilst residents are opposed to houses of multiple occupancy, there was a need for them in the area, as demonstrated by the rising number of houses of multiple occupancy in adjacent streets. Vacant properties are going to be developed to give maximum return, not to provide for the needs of the community. There are many excellent examples of family housing being built across the borough, for example in Hinckley Road, Weddington Road, etc. We would like help from you to steer this development in a similar direction. Also, a recent development in a vacant site in Rugby since the last council meeting resulted in the collapse of a Victorian house, and residents would just like to be reassured that every effort is made to make sure that the cause of the collapse is understood and that steps are taken to avoid a similar incident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification? No? Jackie?
In relation to the bays, there are a few bay windows in the area. There's one to the side of the property directly opposite, and there's a detached dwelling further down on the opposite side of the road that also has bay windows to the front. In terms of the windows, when I meant that they didn't exactly match, was that they aren't quite as deep and they aren't the same size as older windows. In terms of Warwickshire County Council saying it didn't meet standards for car parking, in that instance they were referring to our own supplementary planning parking guidance, which is no longer extant, and as I say, that's what they were referring to. They haven't got any guidance of their own. In relation to it being possibly developed as family houses, we probably, if there was an application on this site, I've calculated the width of the site, and you could just about get 4 terraced houses. It's just slightly short of the 4 of the terraced houses in the area at the moment. Potentially you could have 4 terraced houses along there with no off-street parking. And I think, again, we might be difficult to defend that with no off-street parking. At least with this scheme, we do have the undercroft and we have the ability to have off-street parking. In terms of the objection from refuse, the original refuse objection was actually in relation to the bins, the size of the bins, because originally it was going to be the large communal bins, and there was an issue in terms of the drag distance of those to the road, rather than there being any other issue on that as far as I can tell. That's all for clarification, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Thank you. Any member? Councillor Shepherd.
I still have concerns over this development as I had last time. I think the impact on the street scene and not being in keeping with the Victorian terrace that are already there. The fact that there's no visitors parking, which is going to really impact on the area. And I do feel it's been shoehorned in. I've got real concerns about the quality of the life of the residents that are going to move into these proposed development. They are very small flats. I wouldn't say they were flats, I would say they were bed sits, looking at the size of some of them. I mean, some of them only 15, 16 foot across. So I've got concerns about the quality of life for those people that will be living in them. I have got concerns about the comments from County Highways. That hasn't been used for 15 to 17 years. I can't understand why they've related it to HGV vehicles moving, and it's preferable when there hasn't been HGV vehicles down there for some considerable time. I do think there's still an issue in terms of the enclosure for number 14 and their sense of overlooking. And I'm pleased that we went on the site visits and hope the rest of the committee felt it was useful. I don't feel it's the right design. I think it's over-intensive in the area and I really can't support this development. Thank you, Chair.
No? If not, the recommendation is as printed, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against? I think that's everybody, but abstentions? No. Okay, so that item's approved. Thank you. Can move on to item number 2, please. Discovery Academy, Beaumont Road.
This is an outline application for the erection of up to 46 houses, 12 flats and 1, 2 and 3 storey extra care facility of up to 65 units, including the demolition of existing buildings. It is an outline application and includes access. The layout, scale, design, appearance and landscaping would be approved at a later date as reserved matters. The site is a former secondary school which is partly still occupied as a school for children with special educational needs. The site adjoins Beaumont Road to the left, along there, Vernon's Lane to the north, and Countess Road to the south. It backs onto houses in Earls Road on the east. There is currently a vehicular access off Beaumont Road and Vernon's Lane. These existing accesses are to be used for the proposal if approved. There are substantial hedges and trees to the street boundaries, together with the 2-metre palisade fence. The school buildings are single and 2 storeys, adjoining the boundary with Vernon's Lane. The area is primarily residential. There have been 15 objections from 13 addresses and 1 letter of support. Please see page 36 of your agenda for the details. The key considerations are set out before you. In relation to the principle of the residential development, the site is considered to be sustainable and is of a brownfield site and therefore weighs heavily in favour of the application. As a previously developed site, national legislation states that existing floor space should be subtracted from the proposed floor space and the number of affordable units be reduced to the resulting percentage of net floor space, the calculations of which are shown on page 37 and 38 of your agenda. Using this vacant building credit and the council's 25% affordable requirement, 15 dwellings across the site would be required to be affordable. If this was to be pepper potted, this would mean that 8 units of extra care should be affordable and 7 of the remaining dwellings would need to be affordable as well. Warwickshire County Council, who are the applicant, have advised that the extra care, which is the 65 apartments, will be 100% affordable and a further 7 units of the remaining dwellings will be affordable. It is considered that the mix is consistent to meet the need in the borough and the council's housing team have no objection. As for residential amenity, the layout is to be a reserved matter, so it's not being considered at this point. However, in order to prove that the amount of development can be provided within the site, an illustrative layout has been provided. This is shown on your screen on the right-hand side. This shows that 20 or 30 metres distance standards can be achieved to existing residents. It is therefore considered that residential amenity would be acceptable. In relation to the impact on visual amenity, the scale of the proposal would provide a cohesive development. The indicative site plan and submitted details states that the 2-storey houses would be 8.4 metres in height and the apartments would be 9.5 metres maximum. The extra care is proposed to be 2 and 3 storeys, so would have to be carefully considered but would be achievable. In reference to highway safety, a transport assessment has been submitted, as well as a road safety audit and swept paths. Warwickshire County Council Highways have no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions. They consider that there would be an impact on the adjacent roads, but this would not be severe. Therefore, refusal on this basis would be difficult to defend at appeal. The proposed red line site area is within flood zone 1 and is therefore the least likely to flood. The county flood team have no objection subject to conditions. In relation to contamination and land stability, both the Coal Authority and the council's environmental health team have responded with no objection subject to notes and conditions. In relation to biodiversity, a preliminary ecological report has been submitted and suggests mitigation measures to reduce harm, such as tree protection during construction, the requirement of further bat surveys, sensitive lighting, new planting and bat and bird bricks, all of which can be covered via condition. Neither the council's parks team nor Warwickshire Wildlife Trust have objected to the scheme. An arboricultural report has been submitted with the application, which states that there are 2 trees of the highest quality, that's a Class A tree in the tree classification, 53 of moderate quality, which is Class B, and 69 of low quality, Class C trees, and 5 trees that are unclassified, which would not be considered worthy of retention. The illustrative master plan shows that half of the category A and B trees would be removed along with 69 other trees. Trees of these categories would normally be required to be retained and parks have objected to their removal. The loss of the trees to the visual amenity in Beaumont Road and Beaumont Place would be significant, and therefore the council's tree officer carried out an assessment and recommended that 23 trees were protected by a tree preservation order. Subsequently, an emergency TPO was made on the 6th of June and is to be considered before you on item 5 this evening. In relation to planning obligation contributions, these are shown before you and on page 41 of the agenda, and all have been agreed by the applicant. In conclusion, the proposal would represent a sustainable use of a brownfield site within the existing urban area and in a sustainable location. The recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions as set out on the agenda and a legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr Green. The one next to you.